Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest food law video. Today, we're going to talk about chocolate, which is a subject very close to all our hearts. Um, Chocolate is actually interestingly regulated in the EU level. So we have something called the Chocolate Directive, which sets out the rules for what constitutes certain types of chocolate, like milk chocolate, dark chocolate, and various other technical chocolate terms. And some of my colleagues here today have some great examples of different brands of milk chocolate across the EU. Rebecca, Louis, do you want to show us your examples? Oh, fantastic. And Gail, I think you might have some dark chocolate for us. Oh, great. So with the show and tell of the different types of chocolate out of the way, I wanted to spend a bit of time asking some of my colleagues from around the EU about some of the latest developments in this area that we're seeing in terms of chocolate, because it's an interesting and evolving area. Louis is from our Belgium office and is going to tell us what's going on in the home of chocolate.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. Indeed, from the home of chocolates. I'm going to start with saying that Belgian legislation is now compliant with the directive. There used to be exceptions provided in the law that some products needed to be called imitation of chocolate or fancy cocoa products if they looked like chocolate without meeting the ingredients requirements. This was deemed too severe and was deleted from the law in 2018 or 19, and now the Belgian legislation is fully compliant. We've had some interesting case laws in relation with palm oil, and generally in the last years, this is becoming a very important topic. So the chocolate producers and manufacturers in Belgium have created together, with support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Belgium, um, an organization aiming at having a more sustainable approach to the production of chocolates and palm oil in general, where they set common objectives, how to fight against deforestation or ensure a fair remuneration of local cocoa producer or palm, palm oil producers. In terms of other interesting developments, there's been an ongoing discussion around the fact that whether Belgian chocolate, because as you mentioned, we're the country of chocolates, we have a certain know-how which we are really proud of. So there's a discussion around whether Belgian chocolate should be protected as a name as a whole and not only chocolate out of the directive. There's fear from the industry that some new producers on the market are labeling their own products Belgian chocolates, but are not complying with the know-how or directive edited by the sectors at all in terms of labeling, traceability, or even good manufacturing practices.
Okay, well, that'll be one to watch then, whether they start to build in some domestic protections or even lobby the EU to change that. Rebecca is from our London office, and I think you're going to give us an update on some of the pending advertising restrictions coming in for products such as chocolate.
Sure. I mean, one recent development that has really thrown a spanner in the works is that the UK government has announced new rules on advertising unhealthy foods that will come into effect, I think, at the end of 2022. And these restrictions will really apply to paid for advertising of certain categories of food, like you mentioned, that are linked to childhood obesity, that meet the definitions of fat foods that are high in fats, on sugar, what we call HFSS foods. And that ban will apply to paid for advertising, as well as ads before 9 p.m. on TV and on demand programs. And so this ban only really applies to larger businesses that make or sell HFSS products. And there are some exemptions, such as business to business advertising or advertising on the marketer's own websites. But we're seeing this is a really big change. We're seeing a lot of movement and interest from industry on how this is going to really actually work in practice. There's also a draft regulations being released on the restriction of promotions of HFSS products within in-store and online marketplaces. So, restrictions on things like buy one, get one free, or restrictions on promoting HFSS products within 2 meters of a checkout area. So again, we imagine this will have a really big impact on chocolate traders and advertisers alike.
And I'm sure that's going to be massive,
Yeah,
and I would imagine that almost all chocolate brands would probably fall into
yeah.
that category. So it will be a huge change for the industry. Gail, would you like to give us an update from the Paris office?
Yes, sure. So, as regard the implementation of the directive, just like in Belgium, there is not so much to say. We have a decree dated 2003, which implemented the directive, and we should just mention one specific rule in the French Consumer Code. Because it has introduced a rule on the denominations pure cocoa butter chocolate and traditional chocolate and all other equivalent names, which are reserved for chocolates made only from fats obtained from cocoa beans without the addition of vegetable fats. I think probably this is one of the few exceptions as regards what the directive provides. And another important point from French perspective would be the new rules regarding the indication of the origin of the chocolate. Because last year, a new law was enacted, a law on the transparency of information on food products of June 10th, 2020. And this new law tried to introduce a new regulation and to impose the indication of the origin of the cocoa. But it turns out that so a decree was needed for the implementation of the law. But in any case, it has been it is for the moment suspended since actually France did not comply fully with the European notification procedure.
Okay.
And since then, for the moment, this new obligation, which was supposed to enter into application beginning of this year, is now suspended until France publishes a new decree, which should now undergo properly the European notification procedure. Because, as you know, it is always tricky when the countries are trying to rule on this indication of origin issues, since it is obviously likely to impact the single market. So we are waiting now for the new decree in France to be submitted to the Commission and the other member states for their comments, and to see if it's finally enacted.
It'll be fascinating. I can foresee there could be some challenges under free movement
There
of
will
goods
be.
and similar. Yep. Well, it's a good moment to move on to Sam from our Spanish office, because I understand there's a little bit of history in Spain about maybe the Spanish not wanting to adopt the chocolate directive.
Yeah, well, it was more related to the fact of not calling chocolate those products, including added vegetable fats. So there was a lot of discussion back in the days, in particular around the interpretation of the former directive, the one on 73. And the point is that at the end of the day, when there were discussions to implement the directive of 2000, there was some interest in trying to keep the definitions as they were. But we were in the middle of a lawsuit in the European Court of Justice against the Commission, trying to interpret to which extent Spain was entitled to circumvent precisely the possibility of other member states marketing their products, their goods, their chocolates in the Spanish market as chocolate when including these added vegetable fats. For certain, as it is the case in similar issues, we were not having sufficient reasons to try to maintain this type of restriction to the commercialization of these products, and Spain was obliged to change the royal decree that was enacted before the directive of 2000, and they did that by means of a royal decree in 2003, some months after the judgment was reached. And after that implementation, there was no discussion anymore on the possibility to call chocolate any product, including added vegetable fats. But it's true that 20 years ago or something like that, it was like a really hot discussion, hot topic. But after that moment, I think that we are pretty aligned with the directive. There are not so much challenges in the Spanish market to the commercialization of chocolate products and packaging and labeling. So things are quiet for the moment.
Well, that's great. And I think the position might be fairly similar in Germany, Laura. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So Germany implemented the European directive in the German cocoa regulation. And yeah, that is pretty much compliant with the directive. And there are no other chocolate specific regulations in Germany. So it's all based on the European directive, which makes it quite easy and nice. So yeah, of course, labeling as well as advertising should not be misleading, as always, with regard to chocolate products. And yeah, the ingredients should comply with the general food law regulations as well as the cocoa regulations, but that's no surprise. And yeah, earlier this year, this is worth mentioning, the German Advertising Standard Council, which is a self-regulator in Germany, introduced a new code of conduct for advertising with regard to sensitive areas such as food products, which are marketed vis-a-vis children in particular. And that, of course, is also of importance for sweets and chocolate products. So that should be kept in mind by companies for now. Yeah, and of course there is a lot of or more and more chocolate products labeled with fair trade labels, and yeah, all the usual labels in this sector. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you, everybody, for your updates. This has been great to learn a little bit more about the local position in the various markets. We will be in touch with further food law updates from Osborne Clarke International Food Law Team very soon.